Morning. Please download attendance list, blah, 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 blah. Nicole, can you do the attendance list or do I have to?
Yes, I
Because
can
I
do it.
started it.
I will, oh, no, I cannot. You must
Okay,
have.
I can do it, Chuck. Okay, it's 3:01. Welcome, everybody. In one of your squares there, you see Stacey Conaway, who is from the AICPA. And if you could mute your mics so she can be front and center, that would be awesome. She's going to talk about the AICPA and whatever else she wants to talk about. It's a very interesting subject. I think we've got a lot of accounting and business students here, and they're just flowing in. I can see the names. So thanks everybody else for coming as well, just to gather some information. And I'm going to give the floor over to Stacey. Thanks for coming.
Awesome. Thanks, Marnie. Hi, guys. I'm Stacey Conaway. I am the Senior Manager of External Reporting at Winnebago Industries. And I also serve on the AICPA's Student Recruitment Committee. And I just want to talk to you guys today just a little bit about the AICPA, being a CPA as a career, and then also just kind of general life stuff, if we want to talk about that. You know, pieces of advice for the future as you're kind of figuring out what your next steps are. So I want this to be really interactive. So if you have questions, just definitely chime in. But I will go through a little PowerPoint and then we'll leave some time at the end. All right, so I will share my screen here. All right. Okay, so again, talking about becoming a CPA, I am a CPA and I'm also a CGMA. And CGMA is Chartered Global Management Accountant. And we can kind of talk about the differences there. But basically what I do is all of the SEC filings, because we are a publicly traded company. I do a lot of the incentive compensation. So so a lot of the stock awards to our executives and things like that. I do all of the accounting for that. And then I'm also the resource for technical accounting matters. So a lot of new stuff coming at us from the FASB. So making sure that the company is in a position to, you know, have the guidance be in line with what we need, but to also make it operationally, you know, cohesive for us to kind of maintain the operations, but still get the guidance correct. So what is the CPA? You guys have probably heard this a million times. It's a certified public accountant. They're basically a trusted financial advisor. So the 3 letters essentially give you a little more comfort than a normal accountant would have. They're definitely more than a number cruncher. There's tons of people in the C-suite that have had their CPA exam or that have had their CPA certification. And of course, accounting being the language of business really allows you to kind of pivot as you want to. So you could definitely start in accounting, and it might be something where you start there and then you move into operations or you move into supply chain. So I've heard and I know through my network a lot of people that have done pivots into marketing and things like that. So it's proof that you know accounting, and you have to take an ethics exam, which we'll talk about. So so it gives you a little more credibility than a normal accountant. So 10% job increase for accountants and auditors is projected through 2026. So this definitely not a field that's going away. I do get a question a lot of times about, you know, are you worried that computers are going to replace me? And what my answer to that always is I'm not afraid as long as you can think critically, because what a computer can't do is it can spit out numbers saying, okay, if we shut a division of our company down, here are the numbers, here's what's going to happen. But what they can't do is bring in the softer skills, which are, you know, if we shut down a division, what is it going to do to employee morale? You know, how is it going to impact the organization as a whole? Things like that a computer just cannot do. So as long as you are thinking critically and you're able to pull different pieces that a computer will have no idea about on the kind of soft skills and the human side, you're really never going to be in a position where you're replaced by a computer. All right, so your eligibility to become a CPA, you have to have the education, you have to have experience, so that will come from your employer and the type of work. And then it does vary by state. So all state boards require 150 semester hours, and you can get that in a variety of ways. For example, I did my first degree in criminology, and I graduated and worked for a little bit, and then I decided to go back to school for accounting. So that was how I got to my 150. But you can get there a variety of ways. A lot of people will do masters of accountancy to get their 150. And then most states require 1 to 2 years of experience, which will have to be certified by an existing CPA. So we'll talk about this, but really, really important that you network and start networking now, because you just never know when you're gonna need to call someone with a CPA and say, hey, can you vouch for me here? So the benefits of being a CPA, you have prestige and respect. It's just, again, just a bit of a bump as far as what people think, as far as what your skill set is. And of course, you don't want to care what people think too much, right? But it's a test that allows you to say, hey, I've passed this really difficult exam. So even if you're a CPA, there's still stuff I don't know, right? I get asked tax questions all the time, and I don't know tax. That's not my area. So as a CPA, I have to say, you know, I can't help you out with that, but I know a lot of good tax accountants. I can give you a number. So that's one benefit. You do have a competitive edge over other accountants. Okay, so the CPA allows you a lot more flexibility. I will say that you know, there have been a lot of jobs that they say CPA you know, desired, which means you don't necessarily have to have it, but if you do have it, that kind of gives you an edge. You have career security, okay? I personally will never have to look for a job because once you get going in your career, recruiters will call you. And as you build and build on that experience, people want that skill set in their company. So recruiters will call and say, hey, I have this opportunity. Are you interested? And then at that point, I just either say yes or no, as far as details go. But that's really nice, you guys, not to have to worry about going to Indeed and trying to find a job that way. So once you get your foot in the door and you keep building that experience, you have really great career security, which is nice, especially during times like this in COVID, where a lot of people are losing out on their jobs and things like that. Companies are kind of tightening their budgets. And so I haven't heard a lot of and I in fact don't know anybody in my network in accounting that has been laid off, which is nice, but you know, again, not to say that it couldn't happen, but it's just less likely just because of the importance of having good books. You have job satisfaction and tons of variety. So the way I describe it is being a CPA or being an accountant, if you're not interested in the designation, which is totally fine. It's like a piece of clay, and you can basically take that lump of clay and make it into whatever you want to. There's, you know, you can be extremely specialized in an area, or you can be really generalized. You can decide that you want to hustle hard and work some extra hours and that you're fine with that. Or you can also decide that, you know, I want to take some time and focus on my family or focus on something else. So I don't really want to work those hours. There's definitely a job for you like that. So it's really just what you put in equals what you put out. So again, think of that piece of clay. You can make it into whatever you want, which is it's really nice to have that in a career. And then the income potential. Okay, so a CPA license gets you around a 10% difference between your non-licensed peers, but the income potential in accounting in general is really huge. So that's something that's really exciting. I will say when I graduated with my criminology degree, I entered the workforce and I was like scraping by, right? Just kind of living paycheck to paycheck. And when I decided to go back for accounting, I said, oh, this is kind of a big investment on my part to take out even more student debt and do that. But now, I mean, I couldn't be more happy with where I am income wise. And the great thing about it is there's really no ceiling as far as earning goes. So that's nice. Any questions so far? No?
I do have a question.
Okay, perfect.
The 150 of credit hours, does that need to be accounting specific, or you said you did criminal justice before, so how does that work?
Yes, so there's a specific number of accounting credits that you need, and that number is foggy for me, but it's definitely not. It's not all accounting. There just has to be a specific number, and if you go on the website to this way to see, it will redirect you to your state's website, which will give better guidance as far as how many of those hours need to be upper level accounting courses versus how many don't need to be.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the association's mission is basically powering the success of CPAs and CGMAs by putting resources out on the website that will allow people to have the most relevant knowledge, resources. They do a lot of advocacy for, for governments, just to make sure that we're set up for success as a profession. And then, protecting the evolving public interest. As you guys probably know, technology is crazy. It is going at a really fast pace. And so CPAs and accountants in general are having to pivot really quickly. So we have to make sure that as things change, the profession is changing to align with what we need to be successful. So that's really what the AICPA does, and they do a really good job. And we'll talk about some, student membership and stuff in a bit here. So you have your education, you have experience, you know, you need 1 to 2 years. You do have to take an ethics exam. Certain states require a separate ethics exam. And so my state in Minnesota did. So it's a separate ethics exam, but it's not anything too crazy. Trust me, if you've passed the CPA exam, the ethics exam is pretty easy as far as content goes. And then the CPA exam itself, all of those things roll into you getting your license as a CPA. It's kind of a process. So I would say all in, you're looking at probably, call it 3 years on the short end, you know, to 5 years in some cases, depending on how quickly you pass the CPA exam. But because of that experience element, you know, it's a time investment. Definitely something I think is worth it, but you kind of have to decide that on your own. So if you think that you're ready to start, you know, your journey to becoming a CPA, there's a couple of resources. This Way to CPA is a great resource that kind of gives you a lot more in-depth, you know, resources as far as how to get licensed. The AICPA.org, become a CPA. It has a lot of cool resources as far as kind of a day in the life. So you can find out all the different ways your career can go with a CPA. So what I would say, mind to that, and don't think of your career as being just a linear path, right? Because of course, when I was getting done with my accounting degree, I said, okay, I'm going to do public accounting, and then I'm going to do that until I'm a manager, and then I'm going to do this, and life is going to throw you for a loop. I will say that. So just be really open-minded to how your career is going to unfold. You know, in school, I kind of hated managerial accounting. I thought it was terrible. And now I love it. And that's part of what I like to do is, you know, costing and things like that. I don't do it as much in this role, but in my prior role, I had to do a lot of that. So in some cases, school can be very different from your actual career. And then thiswaytocpa.com is another resource. So the exam itself is basically, the AICPA is the body that comes up with the questions and then grades it. And then you've got your state board, you have NASBA, and then you have Prometric is the test center. So all of these different bodies go into the CPA exam. It's about 16 hours of testing total, and you know, eligible in 50 different states, and then 5 U.S. jurisdictions, i.e. Puerto Rico, for example. So again, your state board is a little more prescriptive as far as what you will need to be a CPA in whatever state. And then different than, you guys have probably heard of the bar exam for lawyers. To be a lawyer in a different state, you have to take the bar exam in that state. And it's not the same with the CPA exam, but there are certain things that to get reciprocity in a certain state, you know, you may have to do some additional work, you know, get letters of recommendation, things like that, but it's not taking the exam again, which is nice. So you have more flexibility geographically as well. All right, so the exam is continually evolving. I'm sure you guys have heard that the AICPA is kind of changing how the exam looks as far as different different specialties. So be on the lookout for that as you're starting to study for them. And the reason that it's constantly evolving is just because the role of CPAs in business is constantly changing. We're becoming more and more people that need to have a technical background as well, as far as computers, how do systems work, things like that. And so we're like the AICPA is constantly looking to make the CPA exam relevant. And to pull out the skills that you're really going to need for a career, you know, versus just a kind of a stale test. So one thing that you'll know is that if somebody, you know, took the exam a year before you, your exam's going to be totally different. So definitely, you know, take pieces of advice from people, but kind of take it with a grain of salt because your experience isn't going to be the same as someone else's. All right, so got a little video here. All right, so the big thing about this CPA exam is again, you kind of get to call the shots with how you want to prepare for it, you know, how many exams you want to take at a given time. It's really just up to you and how you learn. I personally took all 4 sections in about a month. I took one every weekend for a month. And it was really intense. I spent the entire semester before that studying at UNI is where I went, University of Northern Iowa, and as part of the curriculum there. So it was kind of built into your final semester. And then I took all the tests at once. I did not pass far the first time. I missed it by 1 point, which is brutal, but you just have to kind of get right back into it and take it again. So expect bumps in the road along the way, just because that way you're not experiencing as much of a setback as if you think you're just going to race right through it and you know, ace the thing the first time. There will be some bumps along the road, so just expect that and then you'll be good. All right, so there's 4 sections of the exam. We won't spend a ton of time on this, but as you can see, there's a ton of multiple choice questions. And then each exam is approximately 4 hours. Certain things have more simulations or written communications. That's only in BEC. But they want to make sure that you know how to talk to different people. That's one of the big skills that accountants need to have, is an ability to talk to different people in different ways. So for example, when I'm crafting an email that's going to the CEO, I'm very direct and to the point. Okay, I don't give a lot of fluff. I don't give a lot of background because he knows a lot of that. So that's going to be totally different than if I'm talking to somebody in operations and I'm asking them a question and I kind of have to give more background as to why I'm asking for what I am, and how it kind of relates to the big picture. So they want to make sure that you know how to communicate with different audiences. And especially important if you do go into public accounting, because you talk to clients, and again, sometimes you're talking to an AP clerk. You have to talk to them totally differently than you're talking to the controller of a publicly traded company. So again, we've talked about the 10% job growth, 24th top job rating in US News and World Report. So accounting's not really going anywhere. So although it might look different as far as, you know, if we look 10 years ago of what does an accountant do, it's totally different than what they're doing today. Some of the things are the same, right? Your debits and credits, your baseline is always going to be there. But the more things change, the more and more accountants are expected to have, you know, some level of knowledge in that so they can bring it all together. All right, so the AICPA is the world's largest member association representing the accounting profession. Again, they write and grade the CPAs, and they're creators of the thiswaytocpa.com, which is a really good resource. So I would recommend going there even if you're sure that you want to take the CPA exam. It's still a great resource. And if you're not sure, then, you know, bop around there and see kind of what your options are to see if anything kind of jumps out at you. Kind of go through this part quickly. The main functions are advocacy. We talked about, you know, government and regulatory bodies. So protecting and promoting the profession's interests there. Certification and licensing, communications, So kind of keeping us as professionals abreast of all the new opportunities and things that are coming up, new guidance, changes in tax law, things like that are going to impact us. Recruitment and education. So obviously part of the student recruitment committee is talking to students and trying to, give some education about the profession in general to try and get really talented individuals in the pipeline to take that next step to becoming a CPA. And then standards and performance, just trying to continually improve the professional conduct and the expertise. The AICPA has a really great newsletter that comes out every day that I love. So many good bits of information in there as far as like how to use Excel, like different tips and tricks for stepping up your game as far as Excel goes. And then just things that are happening in the business world that you might want to know about. So that's a good resource. So take a look at the AICPA's website. There's a lot of good information there. You can kind of get lost in some of that, but really good resources. The AICPA Legacy Scholars. Okay, so one thing I would definitely recommend is apply for scholarships. So a lot of these are for college students, and there's a lot of money that's out there. So definitely apply. The scholarships are judged by CPAs. Like, so on the student recruitment committee, part of what I do is judge the scholarships. Okay, so there are people who are CPAs in practice. They might be in different areas, public accounting, things like that. But people who know what skills are going to be required, and can spot potential as far as your grades, your essays, things like that. So I would highly recommend applying for scholarships. The scholarship process isn't that intensive, and it's worth it, if you're able to get some money out of it. So there's also exam diaries out there, so you can kind of see different experiences that people have had with the CPA exam. And so you can look at to see like what are people doing. Like these are all appear to be public accounting folks, but there's going to be some others too. So you can kind of learn the pitfalls from somebody else and keep that in mind as you take the exam. Exam prep course reviews. There's a lot of resources out there that will say, like, here's what it's like to take the CPA exam, like answer a few questions so you get kind of an idea. And what I will say there is do not let that hinder your desire to move on. So for example, before I took the audit exam, which was my first test that I took was audit. The night before I was taking the test, I said, oh, I'll just go through and do as many multiple choice questions as I can. And you guys, like, I bombed 15 questions in a row and I was starting to panic because I was like, oh my gosh, this is the day before the test and I'm missing all these questions. And I ended up passing the exam. Okay, so when you've done things like that, or you're starting to go through it and you bomb some of them, you just be calm, okay? Because you're still going to get the information out of it. The more you see and the more questions you do, you'll be better equipped to take the test. But don't freak out because if you don't do well on some of them. Same thing too with classes. If you have a class that's really, really difficult for you, don't let that influence too much your desire to move ahead with the profession. So again, I hated managerial accounting. I didn't do great at it. And then once you end up doing it in practice, it's different. You still use a lot of the same, skills and things that you've learned, but it's different in practice. So don't let that deter you. There's various CPA profiles. So a day in the life sort of a thing. So you can explore people's bios to kind of see how did they get to that position, if that's somewhere that you want to be, or, just kind of see what different people do throughout the day. Because again, that piece of clay can be molded into anything. All right, so planning your career, there's tons of possibilities. A lot of people, if they are taking the CPA exam, start out in public accounting, but there are definitely other avenues. I always tell people, don't zero in on one thing. For example, if you have a nonprofit that you're just really, really into, look for an accounting job there, okay? Because then you're kind of molding what you want to do for a career with something that you're really passionate about, and do that. So you want to start out with like, what type of employer do you want, okay? Do you want to work for a big corporation or a mom and pop shop sort of a thing? If you're going into public accounting, what size of firm do you want? Do you want to go work for a Big Four firm? Or do you want something a little more regional? I started out at Baker Tilly, and I was there for about 9 months and decided that I needed some more resources in my life. So then I went to PwC, and I was at PwC for about 4.5 years. And then what kind of industry do you want to be in? Again, if you're really jazzed about a certain industry, go and do that. Okay, get into it, and you might find out that you don't like it, but that's good information, and you might love it. So try different things there. And then what kind of practice area do you want to be in? We're talking audit, tax, consulting, things like that. So again, we talked about this, but you can be very specialized or you can be very general. Your specialization kind of determines maybe what size of firm you want. For example, some of the smaller firms might not have as much specialization. And so you might be doing audit and tax in some of those smaller firms. Whereas if you go Big Four, they make you, audit or tax, and you don't really have a lot of options to jump between the two. So keep that in mind if you're somebody that doesn't know whether they want to do audit or tax. All right, so interview simulation. Got interview do's and don'ts. Okay, I don't know if this is supposed to be a video but it's doesn't appear to be working. So I will make it a point to send this link out, just because I'm not quite sure why it's not working. But the big thing with interviews is there are definitely do's and don'ts. The biggest thing I would say in interviewing is come presentable. Okay, so if you're deciding what to wear to an interview, always default to being more dressed up versus less. you know, there are certain interviews you might go to that, you know, will specifically say it's okay to be business casual. But if they don't say, I would say wear a suit. You want to have good eye contact with people. So a lot of times if you're looking around, it's really kind of distracting. And for you guys, you might be doing a lot of the interviews via Teams or Skype or WebEx. So it's still an interview that way. So still focus on looking at the person and don't be distracted by your surroundings. The other thing, guys, is that you know yourself the best out of anybody. Okay, so a lot of people get nervous for interviews, and it's okay to be nervous, but what should give you a confidence booster is like, you know yourself better than anyone. And all the interviewer is really doing is trying to find out whether or not you have certain skills that they consider important. So be honest in the interview. You never want to lie or, you know, necessarily oversell what you can do. It's best to just be honest. I've had interviews where they said, do you have experience doing this? Do you have experience doing an IPO? And I would say, well, from an audit perspective, I was on an engagement that was doing work for an IPO, but I've never actually been a part of it. So that way they know, and that might take you out of the running, or they might say, you know what, we really like that person was honest about what they could do. And you're also free to say, while I don't have experience specifically doing an IPO, for example, I do have these other skills that I think would make me successful in doing one, even though I haven't done it yet. So that is what I would say as far as interviews go. Any questions on interviewing?
Stacey, how strongly do you think that these students should look for internships, and at what point in their college career do you think that they should?
Oh, love that question. Okay, awesome question there. I would say seek out internships now. Okay, don't think that because, you know, if you're a freshman, don't think that you're too young to be doing internships, because there are people who start out doing an internship. They'll do an internship every single summer that they're in college. So then by the time they go to interview for a job after college, they're set up really well and they already have a ton of experience. The other great thing about doing internships is that you get to figure out what you like and what you don't like. Okay, so pay a lot of attention to yourself and how you're feeling in that certain job. What things about it did you like? Okay, did you like that your boss was really supportive? Okay, well, write that down on a list of things that you're going to need for yourself to be happy in your career, and just keep building that list. Okay, so then the more you interview, an interview is just as much for them to find out if you're a fit as much as it is for you to find out if they're a fit for you. So so don't be shy about having hard questions for them as well, to make sure that it aligns with what you want. Okay, so if you think you want to do tax, do a tax internship right away. And then you'll find out, okay, is this more along the lines of what I want to do or less? Okay, so then you can pivot. Whereas if you go through school and you don't do any internships and then you start in a career, you might find it a lot more daunting to pivot at that point versus, you know, if it's just a summer internship, or even if it's a full semester, you're not out that much time. So, so I would definitely recommend doing that now. And again, find companies that seem interesting to you, and do it that way. But networking is huge. I would say you have to start working your network now. Okay, so even though it's sometimes scary, like go to networking events where you don't know people and just start conversations. It's really, at the time you're like, oh my gosh, I don't want to do this. I don't want to talk to people I don't know. I would much rather hang out with my friends. Okay. But the more you do it, the better you get at it. And networks are going to help you immensely. Okay. There are people that, like, I've hired somebody at Winnebago that worked for me at Barbecue Holdings, which is where I was before. It's the parent company of Famous Dave's, but I really liked them. So I just picked up the phone and said, hey, we have an opening. It's more than you're getting paid now. Are you interested? And they were. Okay. But you wouldn't believe how often that happens. So make sure that you network and keep those relationships in good standing. Great question there. Okay. So to get licensed, you have to know what it takes to get there. Okay. Which is kind of what we've talked about today. Get advice from people who have been there. I always say the biggest thing that you can do for your career is find somebody who is exactly where you want to be and try to pick their brain. Okay. So if you want to be a CFO someday, start talking to people who are CFOs. Get on LinkedIn and make connections. And in some cases, right, people aren't gonna, they might not accept your invitation, like especially executives, because they're really busy. But a lot of people are really wanting to help other people succeed. So don't worry about, oh, this is so awkward. I'm going to reach out to this person blindly and say, hey, I'm just interested in your career. I did that before with a chief merchandising officer at one of the big airport kind of convenience stores, if you will. And I set up a few calls with her, but she was, somebody that's very high up in her organization, but was more than happy to help me out just because I want to be an executive. So I thought I would get somebody that was an executive, but not necessarily in accounting. Certainly have some in accounting as well, but get advice from people. Do never feel like you're alone. People know people. Okay. So you guys know me now. So if you have questions on your careers or anything, Marnie will give my information. Definitely can do that, and just shoot me an email. Okay. But never feel alone. Learn about the license requirements for your state. So again, it could be different depending on where you want to get licensed. If you're in one state now, but you want to end up in a certain state, find out about that too, and find out about the reciprocity between the two states, just so you know what you're getting into. Decide which exam to take first. There's really no rhyme or reason there. I just, again, took them all in a month. I don't know that I would recommend that path per se, because it was pretty intense, but a lot of people like to take the hardest ones first, and then start studying. Okay, so you can get answers to all of these things from your state board. All of the questions on how logistically to take the exam. So look into that just so that you're aware, that so you don't think, okay, I'm going to take the exam, spring of 2021, and then you find out, oh, I don't even have the requirements yet, so it's going to push it back. So make sure that you know all of these things so that you're not surprised at the end. And then the AICPA does have a student affiliate membership, which is nice because you can learn about scholarships and hands-on accounting experiences, which is nice. It is a good resume builder. You have networking opportunities there. The AICPA does have a mentorship arm so that you can kind of reach out to somebody that's already said, hey, I want to be a mentor. They have members only discounts on various things, which is nice. I've saved some money there. And then staying informed on what's relevant. Okay, this way to CPA.com. We've talked about that. All right, so I will open it up to any questions. Let's talk all things career. Like, what things are you guys worried about? Things like that.
And if you're nervous to speak, you can type it in the chat too.
Oh yeah, good call.
You never know. Stacey, do you ever talk about entry-level salaries versus median salary and how that goes?
Yeah, so coming out of school now, I would say if you're planning to go public accounting, it goes up quite a bit. So you're looking at probably $60,000 for coming right out of school, going into a public accounting firm, a big public accounting firm. Now, again, if you're wanting to go smaller, you know, it might not be as much, but you're going to get tons of experience there. So it's kind of like dog years of accounting, because, you know, you're working really hard, but you're also like getting a lot of experience. So it's kind of nice.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes up. So just, again, if you're somebody that's focused on the monetary aspect, you know, do some research on what's going to get you the biggest gain, knowing that you will have to work some extra hours.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So Joe has a question. If you have your CPA, ever consider a MAC, or is it mostly redundant? I would say if you already have your CPA, I wouldn't consider a MAC at all. To be honest, if I did anything, I would go for an MBA. I think that, to me, the MAC is really, the Masters of Accountancy is really just to get you to the 150. So good question there. Do you have advice for people who may be older and doing a career change? Love this. I would say never count yourself out of anything. So I'm a person who was older when I got into accounting than my peers. And it can be kind of intimidating at first, but I would say, yeah, just roll with it. Just know that, you know, you are going to have some people that are younger that are knowing the same skills, but if a lot of times you can help each other learn, because you have a lot of skills that they're not going to have, right? Like, you've been in the workforce, so you know those soft skills, that, you know, how to go in and talk to your boss about something, things like that. So I would say don't count yourself out of anything, and don't focus on the age, because it doesn't matter how old you are. Just know that, you know, you might be older, and that think of it as an advantage versus as a disadvantage. Okay, changing careers in general. So this is good. It's a good thing to keep in mind, just because you never know when you're going to want to change careers. I definitely have people that have started out in accounting, and then they get into it for a few years and they're like, you know, it's just not something that I want to do with the rest of my life. At that point, this is where your networking comes in, because then I would reach out to somebody who is doing whatever you want to do. If you want to get into supply chain or operations and say, hey, here's my situation. I've been an accountant for 2-3 years. I don't love it. I've learned a lot of skills that I think can transfer well, but give me some advice on where to go. Also, know that there are tons of people in accounting that had careers before that and then came to accounting. So there's always somebody that's gonna your best interest at heart. So just don't be afraid of that. Any other questions? The biggest thing I'd say is be a sponge. There are tons of times where I've coached people that are doing internships, let's say at PwC, and they're so interested in telling you what they know that they kind of block out some of the things that you would normally tell them. So the biggest thing I'd say in your career is like put your ego on the shelf and just be a sponge, like absorb as much information as you possibly can from different people. And don't worry so much about knowing, oh, like I have to make sure that they know that I know this. If you kind of put your ego on the shelf, then a lot of people will give you more information than you asked for. And that's going to make you a lot better rounded. And it's going to kind of endear you to that person. So they're going to be a lot more willing to help out. Whereas if you're trying to be a know-it-all, it doesn't necessarily sit well sometimes. So that's what I would say. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
I know the CPA exam is probably like the most credible, or the CPA certification is probably the most credible. Are there any other certifications you think would go well with that, or is the CPA certification like the first one that, like an accounting student like myself, that I should go after?
That's a great question. I do think the CPA is the hardest hitting. So that's the one that's going to make the most waves on your resume. However, there are tons of others. So CGMA is Chartered Global Management Accountant. Basically what it is like a 3-hour essay exam where you basically do a case study, and then you're asked questions about various things. I did one that was like a dairy farm, and you have to, and then they'll say, hey, you're thinking about exporting cheese to Japan. Like, what kind of considerations do you have? And so you just write about all the considerations and things like that. So that's a good one, because it gives you the soft skills side, and it basically tells you that you're able to intelligently tell management like what things are needed. The other great one is a CMA, which is a certified management accountant. That's going to be for more of like your cost accounting. Anybody that wants to kind of pivot into finance eventually, that's a good one. I'm planning on getting my CMA exam here in the next year. Just because for me on the finance side, I'm a little more cloudy. On the accounting side, I know my stuff, but on the finance side, the CMA really tells people, hey, finance and accounting, and you're able to kind of put it into one. It's also good for if you wanting to get a cost accounting position or be in like more of an operational accountant and helping like plants figure out, okay, how do we cost our product? How do we get rid of, waste, things like that. So those are all good, but there's tons of designations out there. I would say focus on the CPA exam first, and then move on to others. Good question. Anybody else? Okay. Well, thank you guys so much. I really enjoyed it. And again, you have my email now, so reach out if you have any other questions or things you didn't necessarily want to ask in front of the group. And yeah.
Thank you, Stacey, so much for coming. That was fantastic. It was very informative. I learned a lot of things I did not know about CPAs and other things in accounting.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Well, if you guys
Thanks
have
so
other
much.
just reach out and take care.
Thanks so much.
All right, bye guys.
Bye, everybody.